Section 2. A commodity is energy controlled by intelligent automation. The definition of a commodity given by traditional economic theory is exceedingly elaborate and exceedingly long. Being elaborate and long means that different people will read it in different ways. And this, in turn, pulls the starting point of the argument into dispute. What sort of definition, then, is objective and accurate? The three stages of producing, transporting, and delivering a commodity are made up of countless microscopic units, and the process is complicated. Looking for what these three stages share, we find this. Across the production and transport stages, human beings, draft animals, water power, wind power, fossil energy, and machines can substitute for one another in overlapping ways. Across all three stages, human beings and intelligent machines, the internet included, can substitute for one another. So the energy that human beings and machines in the broad sense put into the work of producing, transporting, and delivering goods is undifferentiated, and the work processes, the production flows, and so on, which control the direction in which a commodity is processed and made, are also undifferentiated. The first we can summarize as undifferentiated energy. The second we can summarize Z as undifferentiated intelligent automation control. Taken together, these give us the simple, undisputed conclusion that a commodity is energy controlled by intelligent automation. See Table 1(3). The greatest virtue of this conclusion is that it is simple, quantifiable, and measurable, and it dispels argument at the level of thought. Through this simple concept, we can see the direction of innovation with clarity. First, the share of human-supplied energy in a commodity should be brought steadily down, in the end, to 0%. Second, the capability of intelligent automation control should be raised steadily, in the end, to 100%. The human being likes reward without labor, and also likes mental work such as leading, directing, planning, and thinking. Only when the market is turned into a scientific market that can be measured do we have an easier route to solving the problem. The starting point of a measurable market should be built on the foundation of an undifferentiated understanding of commodities. 1. The sufficient conditions for entering industrial society. In the picture that has settled into our minds, we tend to assume that a commodity's main cost is its cost of production, and the situation of Western Europe, which began on the back of cheap water transport, does broadly fit that picture. But if we go back to the agricultural societies of the continental regions, we find that the principal cost of a commodity was not production, but transport. The reason is this. The energy people spent in transport far exceeded the energy they spent in production. This is why silk in the Roman Empire could be priced above gold. We can dig down into the microscopic and put numbers on this. In ancient continental countries, long-distance transport relied mainly on human beings or draft animals. Raising draft animals was expensive. Earth roads were muddy and uneven for most of the year. Wooden-framed carts were not suited to long-distance transport, and they were particularly unsuited to carrying supplies to outlying regions. The loss when a cart broke down was enormous. Set against expensive animals and easily damaged carts, human porterage was the cheaper option. Under a transport system led by human porterage, the cost of long-distance transport was generally 10 to 20 times the cost of production. To put numbers on this objective fact more firmly still, we draw on a passage from the historical record. Shen Kuo, a mathematician and military officer of the Song dynasty, gave a relatively objective account of the cost of ancient wartime transport in his brush talks from the Dream Pool Mengshi Baitan. Modern Chinese gloss of Shen Kuo, rendered into English. The historical units of volume, 1 du equals 10 sheng.
1 shi 等于10豆. As a rule, when armies march, getting the army's grain to the front line is the most urgent task. Transporting grain is not only expensive in itself, it makes long marches difficult. I have done the sums.
If each porter carries 6 du of rice, and each soldier carries his own 5 days of dry rations, then one porter supplying one soldier can support a march of 18 days. 6 du of rice, with each man eating 2 sheng a day and 2 men eating it, lasts exactly 18 days. If one counts the return journey, that gives an advance of only 9 days. 2 porters supplying one soldier can support a march of 26 days. 1 shi 2 do of rice, 3 men eating 6 sheng a day, gives 8 days, at which point one porter's load has been used up. Give that porter 6 days of rations and send him back. For the remaining 18 days, 2 men eat 4 sheng a day or eat the dry rations. Counting the return journey, that gives an advance of 13 days. The first 8 days at 6 sheng a day, the last 5 plus the return at 4 sheng a day with dry rations. 3 porters supplying 1 soldier can support a march of 31 days. 1 shi 8 dough of rice, the first 6.5 days 4 men eating 8 sheng a day, then 1 porter is sent back with 4 days rations. For 17 days 3 men eat 6 sheng a day, then another porter is sent back with 9 days rations. For the last 18 days 2 men eat 4 sheng a day plus dry rations. Counting the return, one can advance only 16 days. The first 6.5 days at 8 sheng a day, the middle 7 at 6 sheng a day. The last 11 plus the return at 4 sheng a day with dry rations, 3 porters supplying 1 soldier is the limit. Raise an army of 100,000, set aside 1/3 for baggage, and one has 70,000 fighting soldiers. 300,000 porters are already needed to carry grain. Beyond this, little more can be added. Sending the porters back requires escort troops, because some die or fall ill on the road and the numbers fall, and the rations saved go to feed the escorts. The standard for grain transport, 6 dough per porter, is the total averaged across all of them. Captains carry nothing, those gathering firewood and water carry half. The extra weight is shared out among the rest of the porters. Whenever someone dies or falls ill, the rice they were carrying is also shared out, so each man's load is in fact often more than 6 dough. An army therefore cannot allow a single extra mouth. One extra mouth needs 2 or 3 porters to feed him, and even then there may not be enough. If draft animals are used for the grain, a camel carries 3 shi, a horse or mule 1 shi 5 dough, a donkey 1 shi. Set against human porterage, they carry more for less, but if the grazing is not done on time, many of the animals will die. When an animal dies, the grain it was carrying must be abandoned. Set against human porterage, the gains and the losses come out roughly even. Chapter 11. In this account, wartime transport carries no human labor cost. Even so, supplying 70,000 soldiers required a transport corps of 300,000. By contrast, if land were plentiful and free, feeding 70,000 soldiers off the work of 5,000 farmers was not a hard thing to do. This means that under conditions of purely continental transport, the cost of long-distance continental transport was at the very least 50 times the cost of production. Factoring in the water transport that any market would also have had, and taking a weighted average, we can say that the cost of transport lay roughly between 10 and 20 times the cost of production. There is another piece of evidence for this conclusion. In wars combining water and land transport, Sun Tzu arrived at the saying, 1 zhang of grain consumed from the enemy is worth 20 zhang of our own. The center of the wars, Sun Tzu commanded, lay in the middle and lower Yangtze and in the Huai River Basin, where water transport was relatively well developed. Grain transport in these wars would have been mixed by both water and land. Even under mixed conditions, the cost of transport remained between 10 and 20 times the cost of production. In the East, this very high cost of transport remained without a real solution until the founding of the People's Republic of China. In the Huaihai Campaign, one of the 3 major campaigns of the Civil War, the People's Liberation Army committed 600,000 troops, while the number of civilian porters in rear-line support reached as high as 5,430,000. The number of people involved in transport was 9 times the number of fighting soldiers. 3 cases, drawn from the Spring and Autumn period, the Northern Song Dynasty, and the Republican era, together give us a relatively objective picture. Continental regions whose transport was led by overland movement did not have the conditions for a large market to form. If we take the cost of an ancient commodity to be 100%, the ratio of transport cost energy to production cost energy was about 8:2. Unless the problem of the 8 is solved, the local dose, once carried abroad, becomes dos más ocho, is igual a 10, and it can never overcome the foreign 2. The ordinary foreign consumer has no reason to choose the imported 10 over the local, cheaper 2. The foreign market cannot be opened. the local market has no demand for efficiency gains. This is the reason innovation locks itself out. Only when the transport cost of 8 has been brought down to 0.2 or even 0.1 does the local low value added 2 stand a chance, at a total cost of 2.1, of competing with the foreign 2. Only then can outside savings be drawn in continuously, opening the valve of local efficiency improvement, and only then does the local cost of 2 begin to fall, to 1.9, to 1.8, to 1.7, and so on, until the local commodity has a relative cost advantage over the foreign one. At the same time, the very high cost of transport locks the market into a very small range.
Market capacity 等于 variety of commodities 乘 frequency of transaction 乘 number of effective consumers. In a small range, low volume market, all three of these variables are locked. The flow of goods and the flow of information move in step. When the flow of goods is locked into a small range, the flow of information is locked into the same range, and technology, which is a form of information, is locked along with them. So the order in which market problems are solved is not reversible. No nation can leapfrog the transport stage and go straight to solving production. Unlocking the cost of transport is the first precondition for innovation in industrial civilization to open up. The Song dynasty, after the relative shrinking of its territory, had shed its high-cost regions, and Western Europe after the Age of Discovery, both solved the transport problem on the back of high-efficiency water transport. Unlocking the cost of transport is, even so, only a necessary condition for innovation, not a sufficient one. Since the energy put out by humans, draft animals, tools, water power, wind power, and machinery is in essence undifferentiated, the various sources can substitute for one another in overlapping ways. If local human resources are abundant relative to outside demand, the room for local efficiency improvement remains very small. A small range of efficiency gains can be easily met by human or animal labor. Suppose the cost of transport falls to 0. If outside demand is 100 a small volume and the local human labor supply is 1,000 a large volume, outside demand pulls local efficiency up by a negligible factor of 0.1. This can easily be solved by industriousness, and the local economy still has no clear demand for efficiency improvement. Only when outside demand and local supply capacity reverse at the root, with outside demand becoming 1,000 a large volume and local supply capacity 100 a small volume, does efficiency need to rise tenfold. Then putting in extra hours is not enough to solve the problem. Labor becomes extremely scarce. A steady demand for efficiency improvement comes about. Once the gains in efficiency accumulate to a critical point, structural innovation arises of its own accord. The Song, the Yuan, and the Ming dynasties belong to the first situation, an absolute surplus of labor against relatively limited outside demand. A textbook structure of small volume pulling on large volume. Britain, after the Age of Discovery and before the Industrial Revolution, belongs to the second, a textbook structure of large volume pulling on small volume. Britain's Industrial Revolution, then, was not an accident. It was the natural result of the large volume pulling on small volume situation that followed the solving of the transport problem. Large outside demand against the small local supply of British labor forced the British market into using draft animals, tools, water power, and coal-burning machinery to take the place of the energy that human beings had been putting in. What this brought about was a structural change in the energy contained in commodities. The share of energy contributed by human beings began to move from a dominant 9-1 down to a non-dominant 1-9. Objective change is the cause of subjective change in technology and institution, not the result of it. When the Industrial Revolution happened, the later-comers, trying to catch up with Britain, often looked for the cause of innovation on the subjective side, and this is the reason why various theories have kept clashing with one another. One could say that the latecomer, out of haste, loses sight of the objective. Strip every concept of its disguise, restore the commodity to energy controlled by intelligent automation, and the objective mathematical truth becomes easier to recover. Objective change comes first. Subjective adjustment comes after. Energy, as a self-reinforcing thing, produces its explosive release only inside a monopoly environment. The high-efficiency regions of the East were short of coal and iron ore,
The regions rich in ore could not solve the continental transport problem. Only Britain completed both conditions in full. The Western classics inverted the logical starting point. So, although their internal logic is highly rigorous, they cannot let a person see the path and the direction of innovation clearly. Without a clear path of innovation in front of them, different people develop different readings of innovation and different presentations of it, and these differences then produce endless debate. When endless debate replaces science as the leading force of the social sciences, the path of social development is quietly hidden away. Inside a given period of time, this hiding does the leader no harm. It does the leader good, whether from the objective angle or from the subjective angle. Then, Western economists have had no incentive to revise their economic theories, and the same logic applies to any nation or enterprise that has ever been in the lead. 2. Innovation is the reduction of the human energy contained in a commodity. Water transport made water power, rather than human power, the main contributor of energy to the transport stage. Transport cost fell to within 0% of total cost as the energy contributed by human porterage dropped sharply. Production cost then became the principal component of a commodity's cost. Innovation began to unfold in the field of production. Division of labor and cooperation cut sharply into the unnecessary movement work and the unnecessary carrying work and distance of the laborer, which strips a great deal of unnecessary human energy expenditure out of the process and corresponds to a rise in efficiency. Standardization and specialization, in the same way, cut sharply into the unnecessary labor energy the worker put in, with the same effect of lowering labor cost. The steamship gave water transport its area freedom, while the canal and the railway gave continental transport its line freedom. The high efficiency of the railway made the cost of continental transport drop sharply at the key points on key routes. The focus of the contradiction, the high-cost zone, began to shift inside the production workshop. On top of standardization and specialization, the use of the production line brought the workers' movement distance and the energy spent on carrying down to near zero. This was another leap upwards in the energy supplied by machines, and the share of energy supplied by human beings kept falling sharply. The car, the companion product of the production line, gradually turned continental transport from line freedom into area freedom. At this point, the transport stage was unlocked as a whole. The energy human beings put in at the transport stage fell to a level that could be ignored. With the sharp fall in logistics cost, the flow of information likewise showed a multiplier surge. Taking the energy that human beings put in as our yardstick, we can see clearly that division of labor, cooperation, specialization, standardization, the steam engine, the production line, the steamship, the railway, and the car are all means of reducing the energy human beings put in. Provided the objective conditions of demand outstripping supply and a steady scarcity of labor are in place, these means hold nothing miraculous about them. They are the natural outcome of the market's screening mechanism. 2,000 years ago, the standardization that the Qin people brought to the making of weapons, to agricultural production, and to the making of the terracotta army was equally a result drawn out by demand outstripping supply. Once electricity and the production line came into wide use, the share of human-contributed energy in a commodity fell structurally. If we take the share of human-contributed energy in commodities under the agricultural society as 100%, then once the production line came in and moved gradually to automated control, the human-contributed share in commodities had already fallen below 1%. In concrete terms, producing one motorcar takes only 16 total working hours, whereas buying one motorcar takes several thousand working hours. This structural problem turned supply from a relative surplus into an absolute surplus. It forced employment to migrate on into the information field. The white-collar class took over from the industrial worker as the leading class in society. The white-collar group, by controlling information and channels of distribution, added a layer of artificially designed value to commodities, and how much of that added value there is depends largely on the capacity for marketing and packaging. In a market led by white-collar workers, the share of production cost and transport cost together comes to only about 30% of total cost, and may in fact be lower, while the remaining 70% or so is information cost. Information, as a non-essential variable cost served quite well for a given period as a corrective to the balance of supply and demand. Mechanization brought the transport revolution and the first industrial revolution. Employment migrated from agriculture into industry, and the industrial worker class became the leading class. The production line and automation brought the second industrial revolution. Employment could then migrate into the information field, and the white-collar class took shape. Without the arrival of the internet, this structure would have let supply and demand each find their own enjoyment in peace. The arrival of the internet and of intelligent automation has broken the old balance entirely. Set against the low cost, the interactivity, and the real-time information of the internet, the white-collar worker is plainly the expensive option. Intelligent automation built on the internet can take over the labor of the industrial worker and the farmer in full. The new problem in front of humanity is this. Either we complete a new migration of employment, or large-scale employment crises arise across the world, feeding geopolitical conflict and bringing on a war that follows by logical necessity. The second outcome is one nobody wants to see. The first outcome would bring results that go beyond anyone's expectations. Looking back at the two large-scale migrations of employment in the past, we can see this. The shift from farmer to industrial worker did away with widespread famine and brought humanity into a society of modest prosperity on $5 a day with fixed holidays. This went beyond what landlords had expected. The shift from worker to white-collar brought humanity into the modern welfare society, and that went far beyond what industrial workers had expected. In what form will the third migration of employment arrive? Its basic requirements include at least the following. First, the welfare enjoyed by the bottom of society exceeds that of the 4 Nordic countries. Second, the innovative capacity of society exceeds that of the United States. Third, in the new class, total holiday time greatly exceeds working time. Fourth, the degree of democracy and freedom greatly exceeds the American model, with intellectual equality in place.